3 weeks after I buried my beloved husband, Marcus, I dragged myself to my niece Lily's third birthday party at my sister Vanessa's cramped apartment in Riverside. I was still drowning in grief, still wearing black like it had become my second skin. But I couldn't miss little Lily's special day. She was my goddaughter, and despite everything, family still mattered to me. What I didn't expect was for Vanessa to stand up in front of our entire family, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, and announce with a cold, practiced smile, "My daughter is Marcus's child, Diana. So, as her rightful inheritance, I'll be taking half of your $650,000 house in Maple Grove." Then she pulled out what looked like Marcus's will, waving it in the air like some kind of trophy, like evidence in a courtroom drama that had already been decided. I stared at that document, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and somehow managed to say, "Oh, I see," while trying desperately to hold back my laughter. Because my husband had something Vanessa clearly forgot about, something that made her entire scheme not just cruel, but absolutely, medically impossible. But before I tell you what that was, I want to pause here. I'm so grateful you found my story. If you're watching this, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I need to know how far this tale of justice has traveled. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're listening from, because what happened next is going to shock you just as much as it shocked everyone in that tiny apartment that Sunday afternoon. Now, let me take you back to that devastating day. I thought I was simply going to celebrate my niece's birthday. Maybe find a moment of joy in the darkness that had consumed my life since Marcus's death just 21 days earlier. The apartment was decorated with pink and purple balloons, a glittery happy third birthday Lily banner hanging slightly crooked above the kitchen doorway. Children were running around with cake sticky fingers while adults balanced paper plates and made awkward small talk about everything except the obverse. How hollow I looked, how the weight of grief had carved new shadows under my eyes. I was sitting in the corner near the window, forcing a smile while watching Lily tear into her presence with that pure, uninhibited joy only children possess, when Vanessa suddenly stood up and clinked her fork against her plastic wine glass. The chatter died down immediately. All eyes turned to her. She was wearing this peculiar expression, part nervous, part triumphant, that I'd never seen on my sister's face before. It sent a chill down my spine before she even opened her mouth. "Everyone, I have an announcement to make," she said, her voice carrying across the small living room with surprising confidence. "Something that's going to change everything for our family." I felt my stomach twist. Something in her tone, the way she kept glancing at me with those calculating eyes, made every instinct scream that danger was coming. The room fell completely silent except for Lily's happy humming as she played with a new stuffed unicorn. "Diana!" Vanessa said, turning to face me directly, and I watched her shoulders straighten like she was preparing for battle. "I know you're still grieving Marcus, but there's something you need to know about your husband, something he confessed to me before he died." My blood turned to ice. Marcus had been in the hospital for his final 10 days, slipping in and out of consciousness due to complications from his heart condition. Vanessa had visited exactly twice, staying for maybe 15 minutes total. What could she possibly claim he'd confessed? "My daughter Lily," she continued, her voice growing stronger, more confident with each word, "is Marcus's biological child. We had an affair 4 years ago, and Marcus is Lily's father." The room erupted. Gasps. Shocked whispers. Someone's plate hit the floor with a crash. I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body, seeing the faces of my family members twist with surprise, confusion, and something that looked almost like pity as they stared at me. My elderly Aunt Carol clutched her chest. Cousin James's mouth fell open. Even the children seemed to sense something terrible was happening, the play growing quieter, more uncertain. But Vanessa wasn't finished. She reached into her designer purse, the one I'd helped her buy last Christmas, and pulled out several official-looking sheets of paper, holding them up like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. "And this," she announced, her voice ringing with false regret, "is Marcus's will. His real will. He left half of that house in Maple Grove to his daughter, to Lily." As Lily's mother and legal guardian, I'll be managing her inheritance. So Diana, I'm truly sorry, but you're going to have to share what you thought was yours alone. She walked toward me then, her heels clicking against the worn linoleum floor with each deliberate step, and placed the papers directly in my lap like she was serving me with a lawsuit. My hands trembled as I looked down at what appeared to be Marcus's signature, his familiar handwriting, official legal language declaring Lily as his heir and beneficiary. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, not just from Marcus, my sweet, faithful Marcus who'd held my hand through 26 years of marriage, but from Vanessa, my own sister, the woman I'd helped raise after our mother died, the woman whose rent I'd quietly covered when she lost her job 3 years ago, the woman whose baby shower I'd hosted in my living room, in the very house she was now trying to steal. Diana, Vanessa's voice cut through my shock like a blade. Did you hear what I said about the house? About Lily's inheritance? I looked up at her, this stranger wearing my sister's face, and somehow found my voice. Oh, I see, I managed to say, fighting the hysterical urge to laugh at the sheer audacity, the absolute absurdity of it all. Because what Vanessa didn't know, what she'd apparently forgotten in her desperate rush to steal my life, was that Marcus had undergone a vasectomy 5 years before Lily was even conceived. It was medically, physically, scientifically impossible for my husband to be that child's father. But I wasn't going to tell her that. Not yet. Not when she'd just handed me the perfect opportunity to watch her dig her own grave, one shovelful of lies at a time. To understand why Vanessa's betrayal cut so deep, you need to know about Marcus and me. You need to understand what we built together over 26 beautiful, difficult, precious years in that house she was so eager to claim as her daughter's inheritance. I met Marcus Chen in 1998 at Riverside Community College, where I was teaching Introduction to Business, and he was a 36-year-old student chasing his dream of becoming a civil engineer. Most women might have looked past him. He was older than the typical student, working 2 jobs to pay for classes, wearing the same rotation of 3 button-down shirts because that's all he could afford at the time. But when he stayed after my class to ask questions about a group project, something in his quiet determination made my heart skip a beat. Marcus had grown up poor in San Francisco's Chinatown, the youngest son of immigrants who'd sacrificed everything to come to America. His father had died when Marcus was just 17, leaving him as the primary breadwinner for his mother and 2 younger sisters. He'd worked construction and warehouse jobs for nearly 20 years after high school, saving every spare dollar while watching his friends build careers and families. When his mother passed away from cancer at 63, Marcus made a decision that changed both our lives. He decided life was too short to keep postponing his dreams. That's when he enrolled in my business fundamentals course. Professor Diana, he said after our 3rd class, his accent still carrying traces of his parents' Cantonese. I know I'm not the youngest or smartest person in this room, but I promise you, I'll work harder than anyone else here. He kept that promise with a dedication that took my breath away. Marcus stayed after every single class, rewrote every assignment until it was perfect, and asked me to explain concepts over and over until they made complete sense. When he struggled with his first major presentation, I found myself staying late in the empty classroom, walking him through public speaking techniques and slide design principles. Somewhere between teaching him about market analysis and watching his face light up when he finally understood supply chain logistics, I fell completely, irrevocably in love. We married in 1999 in a small ceremony at the Riverside Botanical Gardens. I was 33, he was 37, and we felt like we could conquer the world together. Our honeymoon was a long weekend camping in Big Sur because that's all we could afford. But Marcus made me feel like royalty under those redwood trees. For the next 8 years, I supported his education dreams with everything I had. While he attended Cal State Fullerton for his engineering degree, I worked double shifts, teaching day classes, tutoring in the evenings, grading papers late into the night. I packed his lunches, proofread his technical reports when his English faltered, and celebrated every single A like it was a personal victory for both of us. When Marcus graduated summa cum laude at 4 to 5 years old, I cried harder than he did. "Diana, my love," he whispered in my ear during the ceremony, his voice thick with emotion. "None of this happens without you believing in me first. You saw something in me I couldn't see in myself." That's who we were, a team. Partners in the truest sense. When Marcus landed his first engineering position with a structural firm in Maple Grove, we started house hunting in the same neighborhood. We found a modest 4-bedroom craftsman bungalow that desperately needed work, but Marcus saw the potential immediately. "Look at these original hardwood floors under this terrible carpet," he said, kneeling down to pry up a corner in the living room. "And the bones of this house, Diana, the craftsmanship is solid. We can make this beautiful." We bought that house for $280,000 in 2007, stretching our budget dangerously thin, but knowing it was our chance to build something permanent together. Something that was ours. For the next 17 years, Marcus and I poured our souls into making it a home. We refinished those hardwood floors ourselves, spending entire weekends on our hands and knees with sanders and stain, our backs aching but our hearts full. Marcus learned plumbing from YouTube videos to update the bathrooms. I painted every single room, some of them twice, until we found the perfect colors that made each space sing. Marcus built custom bookshelves in the den using reclaimed wood from a demolished warehouse. We renovated the kitchen together, installing new cabinets that Marcus designed himself, combining his engineering precision with my eye for aesthetics. He planted a Japanese maple tree in the front yard the year we paid off our mortgage, saying it would grow alongside our love. We replaced the roof, upgraded the electrical system, added a stone pathway through the backyard garden where we spent summer evenings planning our future. When Marcus's heart condition was diagnosed in 2016, our world shifted, but our partnership only grew stronger. I learned to monitor his medications, recognize the signs when his blood pressure spiked, and cook the heart-healthy meals his cardiologist recommended. Marcus struggled with the lifestyle changes at first. He'd always been active, vital, someone who pushed himself to the limit. "I have too many years left with my wife," he'd joke during the difficult days when the medications made him exhausted and frustrated. "I'm not letting this heart give up on us yet." The condition brought limitations, certainly. Marcus had to reduce his hours at the firm, eventually moving into a consulting role that was less demanding. But even as his health declined, he never stopped improving our home. He installed crown molding in the dining room the year before he died. He refinished our back deck, saying he wanted us to have the perfect place to watch sunsets together. By the time Marcus passed away that terrible March morning, our little craftsman bungalow was worth nearly $650,000. Not just because of the real estate market, but because of the decades of love, labor, and dreams we'd invested in every corner, every improvement, every carefully chosen detail. The kitchen where Marcus taught me to make his mother's traditional dumplings. The living room where we'd spent countless evenings, him reviewing blueprints while I graded papers on the couch beside him. The master bedroom where he'd held my hand through my own health scares, and where I'd held his during those final, precious weeks. That house wasn't just worth $650,000. It was worth 26 years of marriage, countless dreams achieved together, and the physical embodiment of a love story that had started in a community college classroom and grown into something extraordinary. And now my sister wanted to steal half of it based on a lie about a child who couldn't possibly be Marcus's. But Vanessa had no idea who she was really dealing with. She was about to learn that underestimating a grieving widow with nothing left to lose and everything to protect was the biggest mistake of her life. An ordinary Tuesday morning in May 2016. We were having breakfast on our newly refinished back deck, him reading the newspaper, me reviewing lesson plans, when he suddenly clutched his chest and went pale. "Diana," he said, his voice strained in a way I'd never heard before. "Something's wrong." The emergency room doctor at Riverside Medical Center delivered the diagnosis with clinical efficiency: hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a thickening of the heart muscle that made it harder for his heart to pump blood effectively. It was genetic, the doctor explained. Something Marcus had probably been born with, but that was now progressing to a dangerous stage. With proper management, medications, lifestyle changes, regular monitoring, we can give you quality years, Dr. Patterson told us, his hand resting gently on Marcus's shoulder. But this is a serious condition that will require significant adjustments. I watched my strong, vital husband process this information, so the fear flicker across his face before determination replaced it. Marcus had spent his entire life overcoming obstacles, poverty, loss, educational barriers, and he wasn't about to let his own heart defeat him. That night, lying in our bed with the moonlight streaming through the curtains he'd hung himself, Marcus took my hand and said, "I'm scared, Diana, but I'm more scared of leaving you alone than I am of fighting this." "Then we fight it together," I whispered, pulling him close. "Just like we've fought everything else. As a team." And we did. I became an expert in heart-healthy living practically overnight. I researched low-sodium recipes, learned to count milligrams of potassium, and transformed our kitchen into a haven of Mediterranean diet principles. Marcus joked that I could have gotten a degree in cardiac nutrition with all the studying I did. The medications were brutal at first. Beta blockers that made him constantly tired. Diuretics that disrupted his sleep. Blood thinners that meant we had to be vigilant about every cut, every bruise. I organized his pills in weekly containers, set alarms on both our phones, and kept meticulous records of his blood pressure readings. Marcus had to give up the physical work he loved. No more lifting heavy materials, no more spending hours on home improvement projects without rest. I'd find him sometimes, standing in our garage staring at his tools with this expression of loss that broke my heart. "I feel like half a man," he admitted one evening, frustration thick in his voice. "Like I'm watching our house age while I can't do anything about it." "Marcus Chen," I said firmly, turning his face toward mine, "you are not half anything. You're the whole world to me. The house doesn't matter. You matter." But I understood what he meant. Our home had been his love language, each improvement a physical expression of his commitment to our life together. So we adapted. We hired help for the heavy projects, but Marcus still designed every improvement, still supervised every detail. When we renovated the guest bathroom in 2018, he spent hours selecting the perfect tile, ensuring the contractors understood his vision. He couldn't do the physical labor anymore, but his mind remained as sharp and creative as ever. "This is our legacy," he'd say, reviewing blueprints for the kitchen updates. "When I'm gone, you'll walk through these rooms and remember that we built this together." I hated when he talked like that, but I understood the need to face reality. Despite the medications and lifestyle changes, Marcus's condition slowly progressed. By 2022, he'd developed arrhythmias, irregular heartbeats that sometimes left him breathless and disoriented. His cardiologist adjusted medications repeatedly, trying to find the balance between managing symptoms and maintaining quality of life. In January 2024, Marcus started experiencing severe fatigue and swelling in his legs, signs that his heart was struggling more than ever. Dr. Patterson was honest with us. The condition was advancing to heart failure. We could manage it, slow it down, but we couldn't stop it. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "That's impossible to predict," Dr. Patterson said gently. "Could be years with proper care. Could be less if complications develop." Marcus squeezed my hand. "Then we make every day count." And we did. Oh God, we did. We took a trip to San Francisco that February to visit his sisters, knowing it might be his last chance to see his childhood home. We had dinner parties with friends, filling our house with laughter and love. Marcus wrote letters to his nieces and nephews, sharing advice and memories he wanted them to have. He also insisted we update our wills with his attorney, Robert Morrison. "Diana needs to be protected," he told Robert during our April appointment. "Everything goes to her. Absolutely everything. She's sacrificed her whole life for me, and I need to know she'll be secure." That was Marcus. Even facing his own mortality, He was thinking about taking care of me. The end came faster than we'd hoped. In early March, Marcus caught what seemed like a simple cold, but it quickly developed into pneumonia. His weakened heart couldn't handle the additional stress. He was admitted to Riverside Medical on March 8th, and I never left his side. For 6 days, I watched my brilliant, beautiful husband slip away. The doctors tried everything, stronger medications, oxygen support, interventions to stabilize his heart rhythm. But his body was simply worn out from fighting. On March 14th at 6:47 in the morning, with dawn light just beginning to paint the hospital room pink and gold, Marcus squeezed my hand weakly and whispered, "You made my life extraordinary, Diana. Every single day." Those were his last words. I felt his grip loosen, so the monitor lines go flat, heard the alarms that brought nurses rushing in. But I stayed there, holding his still warm hand, mimicking his face, trying to etch every detail into my memory so I'd never forget. The funeral 3 days later was standing room only. Colleagues from the engineering firm, former students of mine, neighbors who'd watched us transform our house over the years, they all came to pay respects to a man who'd lived with such integrity and determination. I stood at the graveside in Riverside Memorial Gardens, watching them lower my husband into the ground, and felt like they were burying half of my soul alongside him. The house felt impossibly empty afterward. Every room echoed with his absence. His reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. His jacket still hung by the door. The Japanese maple tree in the front yard was just beginning to bloom, and he wasn't there to see it. I spent 3 weeks moving through that house like a ghost, sleeping in the guest room because our bed felt too vast and cold without him, eating sporadically because cooking for one seemed pointless. That's when Vanessa called about Lily's birthday party. "You need to get out of that house," she'd said, her voice full of what sounded like genuine concern. "Come celebrate with family. It'll be good for you." I'd agreed, thinking maybe she was right. Maybe surrounding myself with family, with the innocent joy of a child's birthday, would help me remember that life continued even in the depths of grief. I had no idea my sister was planning to use my grief as a weapon, my vulnerability as an opportunity. I had no idea she was about to try to steal the home that held every memory of the man I'd loved for 26 years. But she was about to learn that grief doesn't make you weak. Sometimes, it makes you absolutely unstoppable. The birthday party ended in absolute chaos after Vanessa's announcement. Family members huddled in whispered clusters, shooting glances between me and little Lily as if searching for resemblances to Marcus. Aunt Carol kept shaking her head and muttering, "Lord have mercy! Lord have mercy!" Cousin James pulled me aside to ask if I needed a lawyer's number. I smiled weakly and told everyone I needed time to process this shocking news, playing the role of the devastated widow perfectly. Inside, though, my mind was crystal clear, calculating my next moves. But Vanessa wasn't finished with her performance. As guests filtered out of her cramped apartment, collecting their purses and jackets with uncomfortable haste, she approached me with those papers still clutched in her manicured hands. Her nails were freshly done, cherry red, perfectly shaped. I wondered briefly if she'd gotten them done specifically for this occasion, for her big moment of triumph. "Diana! Honey!" she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy that made my skin crawl. "I know this is overwhelming. Why don't you stay for a few minutes so we can talk privately about what happens next? About the logistics?" The last thing I wanted was to spend another second in that woman's presence, breathing the same air as someone who could betray family so callously. But I needed to see exactly how deep this deception went. I needed to understand the full scope of what she was planning. I nodded silently and helped her clean up plastic cups and paper plates while Lily napped on the couch, exhausted from her party, her new stuffed unicorn tucked under her arm. The innocence of that image, my goddaughter sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the lies being told in her name, made anger bane hot in my chest. Once we were alone, Vanessa's entire demeanor shifted like a mask being removed. The fake concern melted away, replaced by something cold and calculating that I'd never seen in my sister before. It was like watching a stranger emerge from someone I thought I knew. She sat across from me at her small kitchen table and spread the will documents between us like she was dealing cards in a poker game she was certain she'd already won. "I didn't want to embarrass you in front of everyone," she began, arranging the papers with deliberate precision. "But we need to discuss the practical aspects of this situation." Marcus left very specific instructions about Lily's inheritance, and we need to move forward quickly. I stared down at the papers, letting my hands tremble as I read the typed legal language. According to these documents, Marcus had supposedly revised his will just 3 months before his death, in December 2023, acknowledging Lily Chen as his biological daughter and bequeathing her 50% ownership of our Maple Grove property upon reaching age 18. Until then, Vanessa would serve as Lily's legal guardian and property manager. The will looked disturbingly official. Proper letterhead from Morrison and Associates Legal Services. Marcus's signature at the bottom, a convincing forgery of his distinctive slanted handwriting. Even witness signatures from people I didn't recognize, Sarah Whitmore and David Torres. But something about the whole thing felt wrong, like watching a movie where the audio was slightly out of sync with the actors' mouths. "I don't understand," I whispered, which wasn't entirely acting. "When did Marcus supposedly write this?" Vanessa leaned back in her chair, studying my face with the intensity of a predator watching wounded prey decide whether to run or surrender. "December 18th, she said without hesitation, the date rolling off her tongue like she'd rehearsed it 100 times. "He came to see me after one of his cardiology appointments at Riverside Medical. Said his condition was getting worse and he needed to make things right before it was too late." December 18th. I remembered that day with painful clarity because it had been one of Marcus's worst appointments. Dr. Patterson had increased his medications again, and Marcus had come home and slept for 4 hours, something that worried me terribly because his fatigue levels had been increasing for months. The idea that he'd driven to Vanessa's apartment afterward to confess an affair seemed not just unlikely, it seemed physically impossible. "He told me everything that afternoon," Vanessa continued, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality, like lines memorized for a play. "How you two had been growing apart. How lonely he felt when you were always busy with work, with your students and department meetings. How he needed someone who really understood him, who could listen without judgment." Each word was like a knife sliding between my ribs, not because I believed them, but because of how cruel Vanessa was being. She was rewriting my marriage, painting Marcus as unfaithful and me as a neglectful wife who'd somehow driven her husband into another woman's arms. "The affair started 4 years ago," she went on, pulling out her phone to show me photos of Lily. "Look at her eyes, Diana. Look at the shape of her face. That's all Marcus right there. The high cheekbones, the almond-shaped eyes. You can't deny the resemblance." I studied the pictures of my niece, searching for any resemblance to my late husband. Lily was a beautiful child with Vanessa's olive complexion and bright smile, her dark curly hair, her dimpled chin. I couldn't see Marcus in her features at all. She looked exactly like Vanessa had at that age. But I played along, nodding slowly as if I was beginning to see the similarities she claimed. "Marcus was torn up about it," Vanessa said, tucking her phone away with a satisfied smile. "He loved you, Diana. He really did. But he couldn't live with the guilt anymore. That's why he insisted on changing his will. He said Lily deserved to inherit from her real father, that it was only fair she got what was rightfully hers." The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity and carefully constructed detail. Vanessa had crafted an entire narrative that painted herself as the other woman tormented by conscience, while casting me as the oblivious wife who'd driven her husband away through neglect. She'd even given Marcus noble motivations for his supposed infidelity, loneliness, a desire to do right by his secret daughter. "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, letting it crack slightly for effect. Vanessa's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of triumph in her eyes that made my stomach turn. "Well, the house needs to be appraised so we can determine Lily's exact inheritance value," she said, pulling out a business card from her purse. "I've already contacted a realtor friend who specializes in estate properties. She thinks we could get at least $650,000, maybe more if we update that dated master bathroom and modernize the kitchen. She was already spending my money, already planning to renovate the home Marcus and I had built together with our own hands, our own sweat and tears. The casual way she discussed dismantling my life, erasing Marcus's memory, made rage simmer beneath my carefully maintained composure. "I know this is hard," she said, reaching across the table to pat my hand with false compassion that felt like a violation. "But think about Lily, Diana. She's your niece, and now you know she's also Marcus's daughter. This is what Marcus wanted. This is his way of taking care of both the women in his life." I pulled my hand away from her touch like she'd burned me, fighting every instinct to tell her exactly what I thought of her lies, her schemes, her betrayal. Instead, I gathered the will documents with trembling hands and stood up slowly, as if the weight of this revelation was physically crushing me. "I need time to process all of this," I said, my voice shaking with what she probably thought was grief but was actually barely contained fury. "This changes everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about Marcus, about us." Vanessa walked me to the door, her arm around my shoulders in a gesture that felt more possessive than comforting, like she was already claiming ownership of me and everything I had. "Take all the time you need," she said, her voice soft but her eyes hard. "But Diana, the legal papers are already filed with the county recorder's office. This isn't something that's going to go away. The sooner we handle this maturely, the better for everyone, especially for Lily." As I drove home through the darkening streets of Riverside, those fake documents sitting on my passenger seat like toxic waste, my mind raced with cold clarity. The timing felt wrong. The language seemed off. Most importantly, Marcus had never mentioned any lawyer other than Robert Morrison, certainly not Morrison and Associates, which sounded suspiciously similar but wasn't the same firm. And in 26 years of marriage, Marcus had never made a single major decision without discussing it with me first. Not one. But as I pulled into the driveway of the home we'd built together, I looked at those documents one more time under the dome light of my car, and that's when I remembered something about Marcus that Vanessa had clearly forgotten. Something that made her entire elaborate scheme not just cruel and fraudulent, but medically, scientifically, completely impossible. And tomorrow, I was going to start building the case that would destroy every single one of her lies. Sitting in my car outside the house Marcus and I had built together, I closed my eyes and let my mind drift back to November 2019. Lily would have been conceived around February or March of that year, which meant Vanessa was claiming Marcus had fathered a child approximately 4 months after he'd undergone a vasectomy at Riverside Medical Center. I remembered that autumn like it was yesterday because it had been one of the most terrifying periods of our marriage. Marcus's heart condition had taken a serious turn for the worse that fall. His cardiologist, Dr. Patterson, was concerned about complications that could affect not just his heart, but his kidneys and liver as well. During one particularly frightening appointment in October, Dr. Patterson had pulled us both aside to discuss something we'd been avoiding: family planning. "Marcus's condition is progressing faster than we'd hoped," Dr. Patterson had explained, his voice gentle but firm. "The medications he's on, combined with the stress any pregnancy would place on both partners, we need to consider permanent solutions. The risk of complications is simply too high." Marcus had been quiet during that conversation, holding my hand so tightly I could feel his pulse racing through his palm. We'd talked about having children throughout our marriage, but between my career and his late start on education, then his diagnosis, we'd kept postponing those plans. Now, at 57 and 49 respectively, we were facing the reality that children would never be in our future. What are our options? I'd asked, my voice barely steady, already knowing what the doctor would say. Dr. Patterson explained that given Marcus's medical history, the specific medications he was taking, and his declining cardiac function, a vasectomy would be the safest and most effective form of permanent birth control. The procedure would eliminate any risk of pregnancy complications while allowing Marcus to focus entirely on managing his heart disease without additional concerns. Marcus and I spent 3 weeks discussing the decision. I could see the pain in his eyes as he grappled with what felt like the final closing of a door we'd always assumed would remain at least partially open. But his health was deteriorating week by week, and we both knew that bringing a child into the world under these circumstances wouldn't be fair to anyone, especially not to the child. "Diana, love," he'd said one evening as we sat on our back deck watching the autumn sunset paint the sky orange and purple, "I need to know you're truly okay with this. Really okay. Because once we do this, there's no going back. This door closes forever." I had taken his face in my hands, looking into those deep brown eyes that had captured my heart 20 years earlier, and told him the absolute truth. "Marcus Chen, you are enough for me. You have always been enough. If it's just us for the rest of our lives, that's the greatest blessing I could ever ask for." The vasectomy was performed on November 15th, 2019, at Riverside Medical Center by Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, a urologist who specialized in patients with complex medical conditions. I remembered that date with perfect clarity because it fell on our 20th wedding anniversary, and Marcus had joked nervously that it wasn't exactly the kind of anniversary celebration we'd planned when we were young and optimistic. The procedure went smoothly, but Marcus's recovery was slower and more painful than expected because his heart condition affected his body's ability to heal efficiently. I took an entire week off from teaching to Kay for him, bringing him ice packs every few hours, monitoring his incision sites obsessively for any signs of infection, managing his pain medications alongside his regular cardiac prescriptions. Dr. Rodriguez had been very clear and thorough about the timeline. It would take at least 12 weeks and approximately 20 ejaculations for Marcus's system to be completely clear of viable sperm. They'd need to test his levels multiple times to confirm the procedure's success and his complete sterility. Those follow-up tests in February 2020 had confirmed exactly what we needed to know. Dr. Rodriguez had smiled as she delivered the news, telling us the vasectomy had been completely successful and that we could proceed with absolute confidence that pregnancy was no longer a concern or risk. February 2020. The exact time frame when Vanessa was claiming Marcus had conceived Lily. Sitting in my driveway with those fraudulent documents in my lap, I felt a mixture of profound grief and cold fury washing over me in waves. Grief because remembering that difficult time brought back all the conversations Marcus and I had shared about the children we'd never have, the family would never create beyond just the two of us. Fury because Vanessa was using an innocent child, my own goddaughter, as a weapon in her scheme to steal from me. But more than anything, I felt a cold, calculated determination settling over me like armor. Vanessa thought she was dealing with a broken, grieving widow who would simply roll over and accept her lies because fighting back seemed too exhausting, too complicated, too painful. She thought my grief made me vulnerable, pliable, easy to manipulate. She had absolutely no idea that she'd just handed me the one piece of information, that specific timeline, that would destroy her entire fabrication completely and irrefutably. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Dr. Patterson's office number. As Marcus's primary care physician for 8 years, Dr. Patterson would have complete records of the vasectomy referral, the pre-procedure consultations, and all the follow-up care. He'd also been at Marcus's bedside during those final days in March, which meant he could potentially testify about Marcus's mental state and whether he would have been physically or mentally capable of making major legal decisions in December. My next call was to Robert Morrison, Marcus's actual attorney and longtime friend. Robert had helped us draft our real wills back in April 2018, and he'd been one of the pallbearers at Marcus's funeral, tears streaming down his face as he helped carry my husband to his final rest. If anyone would know about changes to Marcus's legal documents, it would be Robert. "Diana," Robert's warm voice was heavy with concern when he answered on the third ring. "How are you holding up, sweetheart? I've been thinking about you." "Robert, I need to see you first." "Think tomorrow morning," I said, keeping my voice steady through sheer force of will. "Something's happened, and I need your legal advice. Urgently. It's serious." There was a pause, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "Of course. What time works for you? I can clear my morning if necessary." 8 o'clock. And Robert, I need you to bring copies of Marcus's will. The real one. Someone is claiming he made changes that I know he never authorized. Someone is trying to defraud me using forged documents. The pause was longer this time, and when Robert spoke again, his voice had shifted from friendly concern to sharp professional focus. Diana, Marcus never made any changes to his will after we drafted it in April 2018. I would have been the one to handle any modifications, and I can absolutely assure you there weren't any. Not a single amendment, not a single codicil, nothing. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I had to grip the steering wheel to steady myself. That's exactly what I needed to hear. I'll explain everything tomorrow, but Robert, someone is trying to steal Marcus's legacy from me. Someone is using fake legal documents and lies about his character. In that case, Robert said, his voice taking on a steely quality I'd never heard before, you might want to consider bringing in law enforcement. This sounds like it could be criminal fraud, possibly even identity theft. These are serious felonies. Diana. Not yet, I said firmly, surprising myself with how calm and controlled I sounded. I want to gather all my evidence first. I want to make absolutely certain this case is airtight, irrefutable, and devastating before I make any moves. I want documentation that will leave no room for doubt, no space for manipulation, no possibility of escape. The next morning, I was sitting in Robert Morrison's law office at exactly 8 o'clock, clutching a manila folder containing Vanessa's fraudulent documents. Robert's office had always felt like a sanctuary to me, walls lined with law books, family photos on his mahogany desk, the faint scent of coffee and leather that reminded me of stability and order. Diana, Robert said, settling into his chair across from me, his reading glasses perched on his nose. I've been thinking about our conversation all night. Before we look at whatever documents you brought, let me show you something. He opened his filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder labeled Chen, Marcus and Diana, Estate Planning. From it, he extracted several official-looking documents bound with blue legal backing. This is Marcus's actual will, executed on April 14, 2018, Robert explained, placing it in front of me with reverent care. As you can see, he leaves everything to you, with contingent beneficiaries being your sister Vanessa and had children only if something happened to both of you simultaneously. Standard spousal estate planning. I compared the real will to Vanessa's forgery, and the differences were stark and obvious. The fonts didn't match. The legal language was completely different in structure and terminology. Most tellingly, the supposed witness signatures on Vanessa's version, Sarah Whitmore and David Torres, were people I'd never heard of, while Marcus's real will was witnessed by Robert's legal secretary Margaret and paralegal Chen, people I'd met multiple times over the years. Robert, how difficult would it be to get copies of Marcus's medical records from Riverside Medical? I asked, my voice steady with purpose. For you, as his widow and beneficiary? Not difficult at all, he replied. What specifically are you looking for? I took a deep breath and explained about Marcus's vasectomy, the timeline of Lily's conception, and the medical impossibility of Vanessa's claims. Robert's expression grew more serious with each detail, his lawyer's mind already calculating the legal implications. Diana, this isn't just civil fraud, he said gravely, reaching for his phone. This is potentially criminal conspiracy, identity theft, and forgery. We need documentation of everything. I'm calling Dr. Patterson's office right now to request Marcus's complete medical file. Within an hour, we had confirmation that Dr. Patterson would have the records ready for pickup that afternoon, including the vasectomy referral, surgical notes, and post-operative confirmation of sterility. But I knew medical evidence alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to understand why Vanessa was doing this, what had driven my sister to such desperate, destructive measures. Robert, I need to hire a private investigator, I said. Someone who can look into Vanessa's financial situation discreetly, legally, but thoroughly. Robert nodded and pulled out his contacts list. I know just the person. Maria Santos, former lab detective, now runs her own investigation firm. She specializes in financial fraud and forensic document analysis. She's the best. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Maria Santos in a small coffee shop near downtown Riverside. Maria was a compact woman in her mid-40s with penetrating dark eyes and an immediately trustworthy demeanor that put me at ease despite the circumstances. I explained the situation while she took detailed notes in a leather-bound notebook, her questions sharp and precise. "Mrs. Chen," Maria said when I finished, "in my 15 years of experience, these kinds of elaborate fraud schemes usually stem from severe financial desperation. People don't risk family relationships and criminal charges unless they are backed into a corner with no visible way out. How quickly can you investigate her finances?" "Give me 7 to 2 hours," Maria replied. "I'll need your sister's full name, current address, employee information, and any other details you can provide. I'll run a comprehensive financial background, check public records for liens and judgments, and see what else surfaces." I gave Maria everything I knew about Vanessa, her apartment address on Pine Street, her employer at Riverside Community Hospital where she worked in medical billing, even Lily's father's name, though they'd never married and he'd left before Lily was born. Maria assured me she'd be thorough but discreet, professional but relentless. That afternoon, I drove to Riverside Medical Center to collect Marcus's medical records. Dr. Patterson's office had prepared a comprehensive file spanning his entire 8 years of cardiac care, including the vasectomy consultation, surgical notes from Dr. Rodriguez, and post-operative follow-up confirming complete sterility. Sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, I read through Dr. Rodriguez's surgical report dated November 15, 2019. The clinical language was precise and absolutely devastating to Vanessa's case. Bilateral vasectomy completed. Successfully without complications. Patient counseled extensively regarding permanent sterility. Post-operative semen analysis scheduled for February 2020. To confirm absence of viable sperm. Patient understands procedure is considered permanent and irreversible. The follow-up lab results from February 11th, 2020 were equally clear and unambiguous. Semen analysis confirms azoospermia, complete absence of sperm. Vasectomy procedure successful. Patient may discontinue backup contraception. Patient is sterile. Azoospermia, complete absence of sperm. Medically, scientifically, absolutely impossible for Marcus to have fathered any children after that date. Maria called me 3 days later with information that made my blood run cold and my suspicions crystallize into certainty. "Diana, your sister's in serious financial trouble," Maria reported, her voice professional but sympathetic. "She owes approximately $89,000 across multiple credit cards, medical bills from Lily's birth, and a personal loan from a predatory lender, charging 23% interest. She's 4 months behind on rent, and her landlord has filed formal eviction papers with the county. Her car was repossessed 6 weeks ago, though she apparently got it back by borrowing money from someone. But that wasn't the worst of it. I also found some very interesting connections," Maria continued. "Your sister has been meeting regularly with a man named Jerome Hartwell. Notice that's the same surname on the letterhead of that fake will, just slightly modified. Jerome isn't a lawyer, Diana. He's a former graphic designer who was arrested 3 years ago for document forgery in a real estate scam, though the case was dismissed on a technicality. He's currently under investigation for identity theft." My heart pounded as the full scope of Vanessa's deception became horrifyingly clear. "I have surveillance photos of your sister meeting with Jerome at various locations over the past 6 weeks," Maria said. "Coffee shops, his apartment, even a FedEx store where they were likely printing documents. They've been planning this for a while, Diana. This wasn't some desperate impulse. This was calculated, premeditated fraud. The next morning, I had everything I needed: medical proof, legal documentation, financial motive, and evidence of conspiracy. Vanessa thought she was stealing from a helpless widow. Instead, she was about to face a woman with nothing left to lose and an arsenal of irrefutable evidence. That evening, I called every close family member: Aunt Carol, Cousin James, and his wife Linda, even our neighbor Mrs. Chen from next door, who'd been like a mother to us both. I explained that there had been some confusion about Marcus's will and that we needed to meet to clarify everything, to ensure everyone understood the situation fully. Sunday afternoon at my house, I told each of them, keeping my voice deliberately shaky and uncertain. Vanessa has some documents she wants everyone to see, and I have some information to share as well. I think it's important we handle this as a family, with everyone present. I could hear the curiosity and concern in their voices, but no one questioned my request. They all agreed to come, probably thinking they'd be mediating between two grieving sisters trying to navigate a complicated estate situation. I called Vanessa last, and I could hear the barely contained excitement in her voice when I explained the meeting. A family meeting. At your house? She asked, and I could practically hear her mind racing, calculating her moment of triumph. Yes, I said, letting my voice crack slightly. I think you're right that we need to settle this quickly. It's not fair to Lily to drag this out, and I've been thinking about what you said, about Marcus wanting to take care of his daughter. Maybe we can come to some arrangement that honors his wishes. Diana, that's so mature of you, Vanessa said, her tone dripping with false warmth and what sounded like relief. I know this is hard, but you are doing the right thing. For Lily. For Marcus's memory. Robert Morrison will be joining us too, I added casually. I thought having legal representation there would help us handle everything properly, make sure all the paperwork is in order. There was the briefest pause, so short I might have imagined it, before Vanessa responded with enthusiasm. That's perfect. The sooner we get this formalized, the better for everyone involved. After hanging up, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. Vanessa thought I was inviting witnesses to my own surrender. She had no idea she was walking into her own exposure, her own reckoning. I spent Saturday preparing my home like I was staging a theater production. I arranged chairs in a semicircle around our living room coffee table, the same table where Marcus used to review his engineering blueprints while I graded papers beside him. I placed Robert's chair near the window, positioned for authority. I set Vanessa's chair directly across from mine, where I could watch every micro-expression on her face. In the kitchen, just out of sight from the living room, I prepared 3 manila folders. The first contained Marcus's medical records, with the vasectomy documentation flagged with bright yellow tabs. The second held Robert's authentic will documents and the comparison analysis he'd prepared. The third contained Maria's investigation report, surveillance photos, financial records, everything documenting Vanessa's conspiracy with Jerome Hartwell. Sunday afternoon arrived with crisp March weather, bright sunshine streaming through our living room windows and illuminating the hardwood floors Marcus and I had refinished together all those years ago. Aunt Carol arrived first, carrying her signature pound cake as if this were a normal family gathering. She settled into Marcus's favorite burgundy leather recliner and looked around our living room with the kind of reverence reserved for sacred spaces. Diana, honey, she said softly, are you absolutely sure you're ready for this? Whatever Vanessa has to say, it doesn't change who Marcus was. Cousin James came next with Linda, both looking uncomfortable and uncertain about what they were walking into. Mrs. Chen from next door knocked precisely at 2 o'clock, carrying a thermos of tea and wearing her Sunday best, a navy dress with a pearl brooch that caught the afternoon light. By 2:15, our living room held 8 adults, all seated and waiting with the nervous energy that precedes difficult conversations. I'd positioned myself near the kitchen doorway, close to my carefully prepared evidence folders. At 2:20, I heard Vanessa's car door slam in our driveway. Through the front window, I watched her stride up our walkway wearing a burgundy power suit and carrying a leather briefcase like she was heading into a boardroom negotiation she'd already won. Her confidence was unmistakable, shoulders back, chin high, the walk of someone who believed victory was inevitable and imminent. She'd dressed for her triumph. She'd prepared for her moment of vindication. She had absolutely no idea she was about to be completely, systematically, and irrevocably destroyed. "Family," she announced as she entered our living room, not bothering with pleasantries or even a sympathetic glance in my direction. "Thank you all for coming. Diana and I have some very important business to discuss regarding Marcus's final wishes and his daughter's rightful inheritance." She set her briefcase on our coffee table, with a theatrical flourish, the same table where Marcus and I had shared thousands of quiet evenings together, planning our future, building our dreams. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Vanessa was literally placing her lies in the heart of our home, on the altar of our marriage. But I wasn't going to stop her. Not yet. I was going to let her perform her entire fraudulent presentation, let her dig herself deeper with every lie, every fabricated detail, every manipulative word. I was going to give her exactly enough rope to hang herself, and then I was going to pull the trap door and watch her fall. "Vanessa," I said, making my voice sound fragile and defeated, "I've been thinking about everything you told me at Lily's party. I'm still so confused, still trying to understand how this happened. Could you please explain everything again, in front of everyone, so we can all understand Marcus's wishes together?" Vanessa's eyes lit up with predatory satisfaction, the look of someone who thinks they've already won, who believes their victim is surrendering without a fight. "Of course, Diana," she said, opening her briefcase with a satisfied smile. "I know this is difficult, but Marcus made his wishes very, very clear." She had no idea that every word she was about to say would become evidence, evidence that would destroy her completely. Vanessa distributed copies of her fraudulent will to everyone in the room, handling the papers like a prosecutor presenting evidence she believed was unassailable. Aunt Carol put on her reading glasses and studied the document with growing confusion. Cousin James frowned as he read the legal language. Mrs. Chen shook her head slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "As you can all see," Vanessa continued, her voice confident and rehearsed, "Marcus revised his will just 3 months before his death. He acknowledged my daughter Lily as his biological child and left her 50% ownership of this house. It's all documented, all legal, all exactly what Marcus wanted." The room fell silent except for the tick of our grandfather clock, the same clock that had marked every important moment of our marriage, every anniversary, every quiet evening together. "Marcus came to me in December," Vanessa went on, her performance flawless. "He was consumed with guilt about our affair and wanted to do right by his daughter. He said Diana had been distant, always working late, and he'd found comfort with me during his loneliest moments." I let tears well up in my eyes, not difficult given the cruelty of her words, and dabbed at them with a tissue, playing my role perfectly. "Vanessa, I just don't understand how this could have happened," I whispered. "Marcus and I told each other everything." "Not everything, apparently," Vanessa said with full sympathy that made my skin crawl. "But Diana, this is what Marcus wanted. Lily is his daughter, and this house belongs to both of you now. It's time to accept reality and move forward." That's when I stood up slowly, walking toward the kitchen where my manila folders waited. "You're absolutely right, Vanessa," I said, my voice suddenly steady and clear. "It's time to accept reality." I returned with the folders and placed them on the coffee table directly across from her fraudulent documents. "Robert," I said, turning to Marcus's actual attorney, "could you please clarify something for everyone here?" Robert opened his briefcase with professional precision. "Of course. I was Marcus Chen's attorney for 17 years, and I personally handled all of his legal affairs up until his death. He withdrew a thick folder and placed it before the assembled family. Marcus never revised his will after our last meeting in April 2018. Any documents claiming otherwise are fraudulent. The color drained from Vanessa's face, but she rallied quickly. That's impossible. Marcus came to see you in December. He told me. Robert interrupted firmly. Marcus Chen never visited my office after April 2018. My appointment records and security logs show his last visit was that spring. I have documentation proving this conclusively. I opened my first folder and pulled out Dr. Rodriguez's surgical report, my hand steady now with righteous purpose. Vanessa, when you claimed Marcus fathered Lily, you forgot about something very important, I said, my voice cutting through the shocked silence. Marcus had a vasectomy on November 15, 2019, for months before Lily could possibly have been conceived. Vanessa's mouth fell open, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. That's not. Marcus never told me. Of course he didn't tell you, I interrupted, my voice growing stronger with each word. Because you weren't having an affair with my husband. You were planning to defraud his widow. I handed the medical records to Aunt Carol, who put on her reading glasses and began studying them with growing horror and understanding. These records show that Marcus was medically sterile by February 2020. I continued. It was physically, scientifically impossible for him to father any children after his vasectomy. The follow-up tests confirmed complete azoospermia, 0 sperm count. Furthermore, Robert added, pulling out the authentic will, this is Marcus's actual last will and testament, properly witnessed and notarized. It leaves everything to Diana, with you and Lily as contingent beneficiaries only in the event of Diana's death. I opened my second folder and revealed Maria's investigation report, spreading surveillance photos across the coffee table like cards in a game Vanessa had already lost. I hired a private investigator who discovered some very interesting facts about your recent activities, I said. You've been planning this fraud for weeks with Jerome Hartwell, the man whose name appears on your fake legal letterhead. Except Jerome isn't a lawyer, Vanessa. He's a document forger with a criminal history. Cousin James leaned forward to examine the photographs, his face darkening with anger. Vanessa, is this really you meeting with this man? I can explain, Vanessa started, but I wasn't finished. The investigation also revealed that you owe $89,000 in debt, I continued, pulling out her financial records. You're facing eviction. Your car was repossessed. You illegally accessed Marcus's medical billing records trying to find information you could exploit, but you missed the vasectomy because it was coded under urology, not cardiology. Mrs. Chen gasped audibly. Child, what have you done? Vanessa's facade finally shattered completely. She buried her face in her hands, her burgundy power suit suddenly looking like a costume that no longer fit. You don't understand the pressure, she sobbed. The bills, the threats from creditors, Lily needing things I couldn't afford. I was desperate. So you decided to steal from me? I asked, my voice echoing through our living room. You thought you could use my grief as a weapon to take everything Marcus and I built together. You were willing to destroy his memory, his reputation, his legacy, for money. Regina, please. Vanessa looked up, tears streaming down her face, mascara running. I never meant for it to go this far. Jerome said it would be simple, that you'd just agree to share rather than fight it. I didn't know what else to do. Aunt Carol set down the medical records and stared at Vanessa with profound disappointment. Baby girl, how could you dish in Marcus's memory like this? How could you put Diana through this pain while she's still mourning? And what about Lily? Cousin, James added, his voice sharp with anger. You used that innocent child as part of your scheme. You were willing to lie to her about her own father for money. Robert said bluntly. What you've done constitutes multiple felonies, document forgery, fraud, identity theft, and potentially extortion. The district attorney would have an extremely strong case against you. The weight of her situation finally crashed down on Vanessa all at once. She looked around the room at faces that had once loved and trusted her, seeing nothing but shock, anger, and crushing disappointment. "Diana," she whispered, her voice broken, "what happens now?" I looked at my sister, this stranger who shared my blood but not my values, and felt a complex mixture of emotions. Anger for her cruelty, disappointment in who she'd become, but underneath it all, a deep sadness for the woman she could have been. "What happens now, Vanessa?" I said quietly. "Depends entirely on what you're willing to do to make this right." I walked to Marcus's favorite chair and placed my hand on the burgundy leather, feeling his presence guiding my next words. "I'm going to give you a choice you don't deserve, but that Marcus would have wanted me to offer," I said. "I won't press criminal charges, but only if you agree to my conditions." Hope flickered in Vanessa's tear-stained eyes. "Anything, Diana. I'll do anything. First, you'll write a detailed confession about this entire fraud scheme, including Jerome's involvement. Second, you'll call every person who was at Lily's party and tell them the truth. Third, you'll enter financial counseling and therapy. And fourth," I paused, letting the weight of this settle, "I'm going to pay off your debts and help you find stable housing for you and Lily." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Robert looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "I'm not doing this for her," I said firmly. "I'm doing it for Lily, who deserves stability, for Marcus, who would have chosen mercy, and for myself, because I refuse to let Vanessa's choices turn me into someone bitter and unforgiving." Vanessa was sobbing now with different tears of gratitude rather than desperation. "Because that's what family really means," I continued. "Not DNA or inheritance claims. Real family means choosing love even when someone doesn't deserve it." I looked around at the faces of people who'd supported me through the darkest period of my life. "You tried to steal my house, Vanessa, but you can't steal the love Marcus and I built here. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to accept my help, follow my conditions, and spend the rest of your life proving you deserve this second chance." 18 months later, I'm sitting in my kitchen on a Sunday morning, watching Lily chase butterflies in my backyard while Vanessa prepares lunch at the counter where I once spread out evidence of her lies. The transformation has been nothing short of remarkable, not just in her circumstances, but in the woman she's become. Vanessa found employment at Riverside Community Health Center 4 months after our confrontation, starting as a receptionist but quickly proving herself reliable, compassionate, and genuinely committed. Her supervisor recently promoted her to Patient Advocacy Coordinator, a role that allows her to help families navigate healthcare systems and find financial assistance programs. The irony isn't lost on either of us. The woman who once tried to defraud her own family now spends her days helping others find legitimate resources for their struggles. "Diana," Vanessa says, looking up from the sandwiches she's making for Lily. "Sarah from administration wants to nominate me for the Employee Excellence Award this quarter. Can you believe that?" "I can absolutely believe it," I tell her, meaning it completely. "Marcus would be proud of how hard you've worked to rebuild your life. I'm proud of you." The therapy sessions weren't easy at first. Vanessa resisted Dr. Foster's questions about her relationship with money, her deep-seated fears of inadequacy, and the shame that had driven her to such desperate, destructive measures. But gradually, week by week, session by session, she began unraveling the emotional knots that had led her to Jerome Hartwell's manipulative promises. I realized I'd been living in crisis mode for so long that I'd forgotten what stability even felt like, she told me one evening over coffee. "When you're drowning in debt and fear, criminal behavior starts looking like the only life preserver available." I couldn't see any other way out. The financial counseling proved equally transformative. Margaret Chen, the counselor Robert recommended, helped Vanessa create her first real budget, establish an emergency fund, and understand how emotional spending patterns and poor financial literacy had contributed to her catastrophe. More importantly, Margaret taught her how to ask for help appropriately, before desperation makes terrible choices seem reasonable. Lily is thriving in ways that break my heart with joy. At 4.5, she's confident, curious, and remarkably articulate for her age. The stability Vanessa found through steady employment and secure housing allowed Lily to flourish in ways that wouldn't have been possible during their previous chaos. "Aunt Diana," she calls from the backyard, holding up a yellow dandelion. "This flower is yellow like sunshine." "Just like your smile, sweetheart," I call back, watching her beam with pride at the comparison. Lily doesn't remember the turmoil of that difficult period, thank God. But she benefits every single day from the security that emerged from it. Vanessa enrolled her in an excellent preschool program, and she's already showing signs of the intelligence and creativity that run in our family. Best of all, she has a mother who's present and stable rather than consumed with financial terror and desperation. For my part, the past 18 months have brought their own unexpected healing. Establishing the Marcus Chen Engineering Excellence Scholarship Fund gave me a meaningful way to honor my husband's memory while helping other adult learners pursue their dreams despite obstacles. 4 students at Cal State Fullerton are currently receiving support for their engineering degrees, continuing the legacy of determination and hard work that Marcus embodied so beautifully. I've also found profound comfort in grief counseling sessions at Riverside Community Church. Dr. Sarah Thompson helped me understand that choosing forgiveness didn't diminish my love for Marcus or minimize the pain Vanessa had caused. Instead, it honored the man who'd always believed in second chances and the transformative power of redemption. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt, Dr. Thompson explained during one particularly difficult session. It's about refusing to let someone else's worst moment define the rest of your story. It's choosing freedom over bitterness. Our relationship will never be exactly what it was before her betrayal. There's awareness now, a recognition that trust must be rebuilt gradually through consistent actions rather than emotional promises. But there's also a deeper appreciation for what family can mean when it's chosen consciously rather than assumed carelessly, when it's built on forgiveness rather than obligation. "Diana," Vanessa says, setting down the knife she's been using to cut sandwiches, "I know I can never fully repay what you did for me. The money was one thing, but the chance to rebuild my life, to become a better mother for Lily, that's a gift I'll spend forever trying to deserve." "You don't need to repay it," I tell her, thinking of Marcus's gentle wisdom about grace being most powerful when it's unearned and freely given. "You just need to keep becoming the person you're capable of being." Looking back on that terrible Sunday afternoon when Vanessa tried to steal my home and destroy Marcus's memory, I realized that her fraud attempt became the catalyst for both of us finding our way to better versions of ourselves. She learned that desperation doesn't justify deception, that asking for help requires courage but leads to real solutions, that rock bottom can be the foundation for rebuilding. I learned that mercy isn't weakness. It's the strongest possible choice when someone has given you every reason to choose otherwise. True family isn't about blood relationships or inheritance claims or even shared history. It's about love that chooses to see potential even in the worst circumstances. It's about support that doesn't depend on deserving it. Most importantly, it's about doing what's right even when what's right is also what's hardest. If you're watching this and someone you trusted has betrayed you, remember that choosing mercy doesn't mean choosing to be weak or foolish. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is help someone find their way back to who they are supposed to be. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in punishing someone for their worst moment, but in giving them the chance to discover their best one. Marcus taught me that love multiplies when you give it away, even to people who've hurt you deeply. 18 months later, watching Lily play in our backyard while Vanessa hums contentedly in our kitchen, I know he was absolutely right. Love always wins, especially when you choose it over revenge. Did you like my story? What city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments section. I read every single one. Give us a like if you enjoyed this journey of justice, forgiveness, and redemption. Thank you so much for your sweet support and for staying with me through this entire story. I'm looking forward to reading your thoughts and reactions. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. Tales of resilience, truth, and unexpected grace. There's so much more on my channel exploring the complicated, beautiful reality of family, forgiveness, and second chances. By the way, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. It encourages me to keep bringing more stories like this. Stories about real people facing impossible choices and finding the courage to choose love. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.